My son said I was nothing compared to his stepdad. He didn't expect the truth. That night at dinner, my boy looked me straight in the eye and called me a loser. He said his mother's husband, Victor, was the real father now. The words cut deeper than any wound I had ever known. He sat there bragging about cars and business deals while eating food from my table in the house I had worked my whole life to pay for. But he had no idea. The papers, the receipts, the truth, they were all in my hands, and when I finally revealed them, his world collapsed. I still remember that evening in early May as if it were carved into my chest. The pot roast had filled the whole house with the warm smell of garlic and onion, the kind of smell that usually made the place feel like home. I had opened the windows to let in the cool air drifting up from the river. The curtains moved gently, and for a moment everything felt almost peaceful. Logan sat across from me at the table, his fork stabbing at the roast like it had offended him. My daughter Maya was to my right, smiling her patient little smile, always trying to keep the peace. We had been talking about ordinary things, the weather, how the lilacs were just starting to bloom in the backyard, my latest project at the site. I thought maybe, just maybe, we could have a calm dinner for once. Then Logan slammed his fork down so hard the sound cracked through the room. I flinched, the way you do when a gunshot goes off in the distance. He leaned forward, his eyes hard, and the words came out sharp as a blade. "You're a loser, Dad. But Victor, Mom's husband, he's not. He's a real man. He has deals, money, cars, everything you'll never have. From now on, I think I'll call him Father." The words didn't just hit me. They went through me. My jaw locked, and I tightened my hand around the water glass until the condensation made it slippery. For a moment, I couldn't find my voice. The insult hung in the air, heavy and sour, mixing with the fading smell of dinner. Maya gasped. She covered her mouth, her eyes wide. "Logan, stop it. That's cruel. Dad has always been here for us. He built this family from nothing. You're being unfair." Logan pushed his plate away so hard it nearly fell to the floor. His laugh was short and sharp. "Unfair? Look at him. He's still busting his back in construction at 52, scraping by like some nobody. Victor is the one who wins. Dad is just average." He shoved his chair back, the wooden legs screeching across the floor until the sound crawled up my spine. I sat frozen, staring at him, my heart pounding in my ears. Behind him, on the wall, hung an old family photo. 4th of July, years ago. All four of us smiling, sunlight bouncing off the lake, my arm around Diane before she walked away from our marriage. Back then we looked like a family that could survive anything. Seeing it tilted slightly on the wall now, I felt mocked by my own memories. I opened my mouth, but no words came out. I wanted to shout to remind him of the years I worked double shifts so he and his sister had what they needed. Of the braces I paid for, the tuition checks, the nights I came home with, dust caked in my boots just to keep a roof over their heads, but my throat closed up. I swallowed my pride and stayed quiet. Maya leaned across the table, her voice softer now, but with steel underneath. "Logan, you have no right to talk to Dad that way. He is not obsolete. He is our father. Victor is nothing but an outsider." Logan's face twisted. "You're blind. Victor understands the world. Dad doesn't. Victor is giving me chances, real advice. Dad is just holding me back." His words rattled through the room, echoing off the walls like poison. I sat there motionless, my chest aching with a mix of anger and sorrow. My hand brushed against the edge of the table, feeling the grooves carved from years of family dinners, birthdays, and quiet nights when things still felt whole. For a second, I almost spoke. I almost told him how much his words cut, how deep the wound went. But instead I stared at the photo, at that crooked frame, at the frozen smiles of people who didn't exist anymore. Maya stood and wrapped her arms around me. "Don't listen to him, Dad. He's wrong. You're the best father anyone could ask for." Her words soothed me, but the wound was still raw, bleeding inside. She kissed my cheek, whispered, "I love you," and promised to talk to him later. Then she left, the front door clicking shut behind her. The house went silent. I sat at the table, the roast gone cold, half-empty glasses staring back at me, napkins crumpled in defeat. Logan's footsteps were already fading down the street, leaving me with nothing but the echo of his words. I stayed there, staring at that tilted family photo. Something inside me shifted. Years of sacrifice had been written off with one cruel sentence. My anger was no longer just a passing flame. It was shaping into something sharper, something I could not ignore. I didn't clear the table. I didn't move. I sat in that silence, letting his words settle like stones in my chest, until one thought rose above all the others. Enough was enough. And that was the moment I decided things were about to change. I walked out onto the back deck that night, the cool air pressing against my face. The boards creaked beneath me, each step sounding louder in the quiet than it should have. I left the lights on inside, the messy dinner table glowing behind the glass door like a reminder of the words still burning in my ears. Out here, the air carried the scent of lilacs drifting from the neighbor's yard, soft and sweet, so different from the bitterness stirring in me. I pulled a beer from the fridge before stepping out, the bottle slick with condensation. The cap hissed as it came off, and I took a long swallow, letting the sharp taste bite at the back of my throat. I dropped into the old patio chair I had built years ago, its paint peeling after too many winters. Above me the sky was wide open, stars scattered like someone had tossed them from a bucket. I leaned back, listening to the faint hum of cars on the distant highway, the river's steady whisper moving through the night. My anger refused to quiet. Logan's words looped again and again, louder every time, digging deeper than any insult I had ever taken in my life. I reached down beside the chair and pulled out a shoebox I kept tucked under the deck. It was dusty, worn at the edges, filled with papers I had carried for years. My ledger. I set it on my lap and opened it, the smell of old paper rising as the lid came off. Inside were receipts, bank statements, pay stubs, and repair invoices. My whole story, written in ink. The first one I pulled out was from 2015, tuition payment to the community college. Back then, Logan had promised he would stick it out, said all he needed was a little push. I remembered working 12-hour days pouring concrete, hands cracked and stiff, so I could slide that check across the counter. He dropped out a year later. The paper trembled in my hand, not from the breeze, but from the anger crawling under my skin. I dug deeper. A car insurance bill from 2017, my name printed bold across the top. I had given him that Honda Civic, reliable, clean, good enough to get him started. I still saw his face, unimpressed, muttering how Victor drove something better. Yet month after month I kept the payments going, making sure the car stayed on the road. I pressed the page flat against my knee, my jaw tight. There was the mortgage paperwork from 2019. I remembered that day with painful clarity. Logan had stood in the empty living room of that two-bedroom house, saying he needed stability, saying he was ready to prove himself. His credit was a wreck, so everything had to go in my name. I dipped into what savings I had left for the down payment, thinking this was the moment he would grow up. I held the paper now, the ink faded slightly, but my signature still clear, each stroke made with pride that now felt foolish. I flipped through electricity bills, phone bills, envelopes marked "Final Notice" that had been redirected to my address so I could quietly pay them before he lost service. Each one was a reminder of how many times I had chosen sacrifice over comfort, overtime shifts over vacations, exhaustion over rest. My life had been built on giving him chances, yet he sat across from me tonight and called me nothing. The night air pressed heavier, and I drained the last of the beer before crushing the empty can in my fist. The sharp crinkle cut through the stillness. I set it on the railing and kept staring at the pile of papers on my lap. Every receipt felt like a nail hammered into me. Every bill a reminder of the quiet choices I had made. Logan never noticed them, never asked how I managed, never said thank you. I leaned back, eyes on the stars. I thought about the vacations I had skipped, the birthdays I spent on construction sites, the times I went home with dust ground into my boots, only to write another check or hand over another set of keys. For years I told myself this was what fathers did, that one day he would see the truth. But tonight made it clear he would never see it as long as I kept carrying him. I closed the box, the papers shifting inside with a dull rustle, and placed it back under the chair. The ledger was finished. Not the record itself, but the role it had played in my life. I felt something harden inside me, sharper than anger, stronger than hurt. A decision. The stars shimmered overhead, steady and calm, as if they had been watching me make the same mistakes for too long. I sat in the quiet until the air grew colder, until the smell of lilacs faded and the neighborhood fell still. By the time I stood, I knew the truth. Tomorrow I would stop writing checks. Tomorrow I would stop paying for everything. Tomorrow Logan would learn what life looked like without my back holding him up. The sun was barely over the rooftops when I pulled my old pickup into Logan's street. The air was sharp with morning dew, the kind that clings to the grass and makes the whole neighborhood shine. Birds chirped from the power lines, cheerful in a way that only made the weight in my chest heavier. I sat for a moment with the engine idling, my hand tight around the steering wheel. This was not a visit, not a talk. It was business. Logan's Honda Civic sat in the driveway, silver paint still gleaming from the wash I had paid for a couple weeks back. The sight of it stirred something in me, a mix of pride and regret. I remembered the day I surprised him with it, a red bow tied across the hood like in those commercials. He was 21 then, just out of school, unsure of what came next. I thought the car would help him start building his life. He looked at it, shrugged, and said it was fine, but Victor drove something better. That memory still pressed on me like a bruise. I killed the engine of my truck and stepped out. Gravel crunched under my boots as I walked up the short path. The front porch looked careless, curtains pulled tight against the daylight. I raised my hand and knocked 3 times, firm and deliberate. Inside I heard shuffling, the sound of locks turning. The door opened, and there he stood, hair sticking up, eyes half shut from whatever late night he had. He wore wrinkled pajamas, and the smell of stale beer drifted out with him. "Dad, what are you doing here so early?" he muttered, rubbing his face. I stood straight, looking him square in the eyes. "I'm here for the car keys, Logan. Hand them over." He blinked, caught off guard, then laughed a short fake laugh that grated like sandpaper. "What, are you serious? That's my car. You gave it to me years ago. You can't just take it back." I reached into my jacket pocket and pulled out a folded sheet of paper. The registration. I held it up, steady. "This is in my name. I paid every insurance bill, every repair, every tank of gas that kept it running. It isn't yours, it never was. Hand me the keys." His grip tightened on the doorframe, his voice rising. "You can't just show up and take it. That's theft. I'll call the cops if I have to." I stepped closer, my voice calm but hard. "No, son. Keeping something that belongs to someone else, that is theft. The police would see this paper and know the truth. So hand me the keys, or I'll call them myself and let them deal with it." Across the street, a neighbor had paused, hose in hand, water spilling onto the sidewalk as she stared. Her eyes moved from me to Logan, taking in the standoff. The birds kept chirping, but the air between us was thick. Logan's bravado faltered, just for a second, and I saw uncertainty creep into his face. He cursed under his breath, disappeared into the house, and a moment later came back with the keys dangling from his fingers. His hand shook as he shoved them toward me. "Fine, take it, but this is low, Dad, really low. Victor was right about you. You're bitter, just bitter." I took the keys without answering. The metal felt heavy in my palm, a small victory I could finally hold. I walked past him without another word, the smell of his anger following me down the steps. Sliding into the Civic, I turned the ignition. The engine purred smooth, thanks to the tune-up I had covered just weeks before. In the rearview mirror, I saw him standing on the porch, arms crossed, fury burning in his glare. As I backed out, his figure shrank, but the weight of that look stayed with me. I turned onto the street, the dashboard clock ticking forward, and for the first time in years, I felt something shift. The road ahead stretched quiet and open. My hands gripped the wheel, steady. The Honda hummed beneath me as if it knew it was returning to where it belonged. I passed rows of modest houses, each one waking up to the day. Sprinklers hissed, mailboxes clanged shut, dogs barked behind fences. Life moved on around me while I drove with a singular focus. I could almost hear Logan's voice in my head, mocking, calling me outdated, obsolete. But with every turn of the wheel, those words lost some of their sting. I was not obsolete. I was not outdated. I was reclaiming what I had built. The river came into view on my left, catching the light of the rising Sunday. The sight steadied me, reminded me of the years I had worked along its banks, building bridges, laying foundations, sweating in the summer heat. That river had seen my labor, even if my own son chose to forget it. As I drove toward downtown, a thought pressed harder and harder in my chest. This was just the beginning. The car was only step one. There was more to take back, more to cut off, more to show him. If he wanted to see what life looked like without me, then I was ready to show him. I tightened my grip on the wheel, eyes fixed on the road ahead, and let the Civic carry me toward the next step. The sun had risen higher by the time I pulled into the parking lot of the credit union downtown. The pavement was still damp from the night before, the smell of wet concrete hanging in the cool morning air. I parked the Civic in a corner space and sat for a moment with my hands on the steering wheel. My pulse was steady now, not from calm but from determination. Taking back the car was one thing. Cutting off the house was something much bigger. I stepped out, the gravel crunching under my boots, and walked toward the glass doors. They slid open with a quiet whoosh, letting out the smell of polished tile and fresh coffee. The lobby was nearly empty, just a couple of people waiting in chairs, heads bent over their phones. My boots echoed across the floor as I approached the counter. A young teller looked up, her blouse crisp, her face calm in that professional way they practice. "Good morning, sir. How can I help you today?" I laid out the documents I had brought, spreading them neatly across the counter. Mortgage statements, identification, account information. The ink on those papers told the story of years I could never get back. "I need to cancel the automatic payments tied to this property," I said. My voice was firm, even. "I own it, but the living arrangement has changed." She nodded, fingers flying across her keyboard. The clicking of the keys was sharp and steady, almost like a clock ticking. "All right, let me pull this up. Just a moment." While she worked, I let my eyes wander around the lobby. Sunlight streamed through the tall windows, bouncing off the polished tile and landing in golden squares across the floor. A potted plant stood in the corner, its leaves glossy under the light. The place felt clean, ordered, controlled, the exact opposite of the chaos in my life. As I stood there, my mind drifted back to the day I signed for that house in 2019. Logan had been there with me at the real estate office. He sat slouched in the chair, scrolling his phone, while I scribbled my initials on page after page. I remembered glancing at him, hoping to see some excitement in his eyes, some spark of gratitude. Instead, he muttered, "Thanks, Dad, this place will do." Like I had just picked up a fast food order instead of draining my savings to give him a fresh start. "Here we are," the teller's voice pulled me back. She slid a form across the counter, the paper smooth and new. "Just sign here and the payments will stop. The resident will be notified by mail. It may take a few days for the change to process." I picked up the pen, the cool weight of it resting in my hand. I thought of all the nights I had come home late from the site, too tired to eat but still opening the laptop to make sure the mortgage payment cleared. I thought of the times Logan called asking for more money, never once asking how I was managing. I pressed the pen to the paper and signed my name in one sure stroke. The ink flowed dark and final. "That's fine," I said quietly, sliding the form back to her. "Thank you." She smiled politely, unaware of the storm that signature represented. She gathered the papers and tucked them neatly into a folder. I stepped aside, standing near the potted plant, and pulled out my phone. It buzzed almost immediately in my hand. Logan's voice erupted before I could even say hello. "Dad, what the hell? The bank just called. Payments are stopping. You're evicting me. This is my house." I gripped the phone tighter, heat rising in my chest, but I kept my words calm. "It's my house, Logan. My name is on the deed. My money has kept it alive all these years. You were never on the paperwork. You've been a guest, and I covered everything. You've had years to step up." His voice cracked, panic breaking through the anger. "You can't do this. Where am I supposed to go? You're ruining my life over one comment." "One comment," I repeated, letting the silence stretch before answering. "This isn't about one comment, son. This is years of you taking while I carried the load. Years of you praising Victor while spitting on me. It's time you stand on your own." "Wait, Dad. Listen, I didn't mean it like that. Victor has been helping, but please don't do this." His words tumbled out fast, desperate, the voice of a man who had never been told no. I ended the call without another word. The click was final. The silence afterward felt heavier than the lobby around me. I slipped the phone back into my pocket and walked toward the doors, the sunlight spilling through the glass. Outside, the air smelled of wet grass, fresh and cool. I stood for a moment on the steps, the folder tucked under my arm like a shield. People walked by, heading into the bank, unaware of the war I had just started. I looked at the Civic parked in the corner of the lot, sunlight glinting off the hood. It felt like a symbol now, not just a car. One thing reclaimed, one burden lifted. But as I started walking toward it, I knew this was only the beginning. Cutting off the house was a step, but the road ahead was longer, and the fights would be harder. I slid into the driver's seat, the engine purring as it came alive. My hands rested on the wheel, steady and sure. For the first time in years, I felt the balance shift. I was not the man being taken for granted anymore. I was the man drawing the line. As I pulled out of the lot, the folder safe on the passenger seat, I whispered to myself, "It starts now." I had just set the folder down on the kitchen counter when the phone buzzed again. The house was quiet except for the faint hum of the refrigerator and the ticking of the wall clock. I poured myself a cup of coffee, the steam curling up in front of my face, when Maya's name lit the screen. I answered, already bracing myself. "Dad, what's going on?" she asked, her voice tight and rushed. "Logan just called me freaking out. He says you took the car and stopped the house payments. He's losing his mind. He said he's going straight to Victor." I leaned back in the old armchair by the window, the fabric worn thin where my shoulders had rested for years. Sunlight broke through the curtains in stripes, cutting across the floor like gold bars. I closed my eyes for a moment before answering. "I just reclaimed what's mine, Maya. The car was never his, and the mortgage was draining me dry. He'll be fine. He needs to learn." Her voice softened, but carried worry. "Dad, you know Victor's behind all this. Logan said Victor offered to cover the mortgage himself, but only if Logan cuts you off completely. And he laughed about it, like it was some game." My jaw tightened. "Of course he did. That's what Victor does. He slithers into people's lives, makes them believe they owe him everything while he pulls the strings." Maya hesitated on the other end, and I could hear her breathing quicken. "I just don't want you walking into something bigger than you realize. Logan's angry, and Victor, he's not going to let this go easily." Her words sat heavy in the room. I stared out the window at the quiet street. A couple of kids pedaled past on bikes, their laughter faint in the spring air. Life outside looked normal, but inside me a storm was building. "I'm fine, sweetheart," I said. "I've let this go on too long. It's time someone reminded Logan who really stood behind him." We talked a little longer, her voice steadying me. Before she hung up, she said softly, "Just promise me you'll be careful." I promised, even though I knew care had little to do with it anymore. I barely set the phone down before it buzzed again. This time the screen showed a name I hadn't seen in months. Diane. My ex-wife. I hesitated, then swiped to answer. Her voice came through sharp and frantic. Tom, what on earth are you doing? Logan is hysterical. He says you took his car and stopped the house payments. Have you lost your mind? I stood and began pacing, my hand resting on the windowsill. The wood felt smooth under my fingers, familiar. Nice to hear from you too, Diane. No, I haven't lost my mind. I took back what was mine. The car I bought, the house I paid for. He's had years of help. You can't just throw him out, she shot back. Her voice cracked with emotion. He's your son. Victor and I are worried sick. Victor says if you don't fix this, he'll get lawyers involved. There it was. Victor again. Always Victor. I walked a slow circle through the room, each step measured. My eyes landed on the family photo on the mantel. The one from years ago when the kids were small and Diane and I still believed forever meant something. I felt the weight of it pressing down on me. Lawyers, I repeated, my voice even carrying steel. Let him try. Everything is in my name. This isn't cruelty. This is about respect. I built the ground Logan is standing on. She paused, and when she spoke again, her voice softened, almost pleading. Please, Tom, for old time's sake. Logan needs stability. Victor says you're being unreasonable. He's willing to help, but only if you back off. I stopped pacing, my jaw clenched. The light outside dimming as clouds rolled in. Victor's help always comes with strings. Tell them both. I'm finished being the silent provider. Logan learns now, or he never will. You don't understand, she whispered. He says he'll cut you out completely. We are family, Tom. Fix this before it's too late. And then she hung up. The silence that followed was louder than the call itself. I set the phone on the counter, its dark screen reflecting the sunlight fading from the window. I poured the rest of my coffee, the steam gone now, nothing but lukewarm bitterness. In that silence I realized something. Victor wasn't just circling. He was already inside, pulling every string, turning my own son against me, whispering into Diane's ear until her words were no longer her own. I sat back in the armchair, the house too quiet, the clock ticking louder with every second. I had drawn a line, but I could already feel the pressure pushing back. This wasn't going to end with a car or a house. This was going to be a war. The phone lay on the counter, still and silent, but I kept glancing at it, waiting for it to buzz again, waiting for the next strike. I drove across town with the folder sitting on the passenger seat like a passenger itself, heavy with documents that carried years of sacrifice. The sky had turned gray, clouds piling up thick, and the radio played low, a country song about broken families that felt a little too close to home. I pulled into a small parking lot in front of a plain brick building on the edge of town. The sign above the door read Reed and Associates. My old lawyer, Jacob, still kept the same office he had back when I first needed him years ago. Inside, the place smelled of coffee and paper. The waiting room was simple, a couple of chairs, a table stacked with magazines that no one read anymore. The receptionist gave me a polite nod and waved me through. My boots echoed on the tiled floor as I made my way down the hall. Jacob stood when I entered, his desk buried under piles of files. He was a broad man with thinning gray hair and sharp eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses. His handshake was strong, the kind of grip that reminded you he had been doing this for decades. Tom, he said, gesturing toward the chair across from him. It's been a while. What's going on? I sat, dropped the folder onto his desk, and leaned forward. I need advice. I've taken back the car, stopped paying on the house. Logan is losing it, and Victor is threatening lawyers. I need to know where I stand. He opened the folder and started sifting through the documents. His pen tapped against the desk as he read, his eyes moving quickly from one page to the next. You kept records, he said finally. That's good. Most fathers in your position wouldn't have been this organized. I didn't think it would come to this, I admitted. But I couldn't keep carrying him. And Victor is circling, trying to make himself the hero while I look like the villain. Jacob looked up at me, his eyes sharp. Let's start with the basics. The car is in your name, paid for and insured by you. He has no legal claim. The house mortgage is also in your name. He's never signed anything, not as a tenant, not as a co-borrower. That means you're on solid ground. If they try to argue undue influence or emotional distress, these records will bury them. I exhaled slowly, the tension in my shoulders easing just a little. So Victor's threats are empty. Not completely, Jacob said. He flipped another page and leaned back in his chair. Victor's the kind of man who uses intimidation. He'll push until you flinch, but legally, you're covered. In fact, I've seen filings on some of his businesses. There have been a few tax liens, nothing massive, but enough to show cracks in his empire. If he tries to get aggressive, that can be leverage. I sat up straighter, the words hitting me like a jolt of energy. Tax liens, you're telling me the man who struts around in his fancy suits and cars has cracks in the foundation. Jacob allowed himself the faintest smile. Every empire has weak spots. The key is knowing where to press. I can draft a cease and desist letter if you want it ready. And if Victor drags this into court, we'll counter with years of your documented financial support. You're not abandoning your son. You've been bankrolling him. There's a difference. Oh. I looked down at my hands, calloused and rough from years on the job site. For so long I had felt like I was standing alone, carrying everything on my back while Victor played puppet master. For the first time I felt the ground under me start to steady. What about Logan? I asked quietly. He's not a kid anymore, but he's acting like one. He's furious. I don't want him destroyed. I just want him to grow up. Jacob's expression softened. You can't protect him from reality forever, Tom. You gave him more than enough chances. This isn't about destroying him. This is about boundaries. If he decides to turn that into a war, that's on him, not you. I nodded, the words heavy but true. The rain started tapping against the window, soft at first, then steady. Jacob gathered the documents back into the folder and pushed it toward me. File for full title transfer on the house. That move will force their hand and protect your position, and keep everything documented. Calls, texts, payments. The paper trail is your shield. I took the folder, the weight of it pressing into my palm. Thank you, I said. My voice came out low, but steady. As I left his office, the sound of the rain followed me down the hall. Each drop against the glass felt like a clock ticking, counting down to the next move. When I stepped back into the parking lot, the air was thick with the smell of wet asphalt. I climbed into the Civic, the folder on the seat beside me. I sat for a long moment with the engine off, the rain pattering on the windshield, my reflection staring back at me. For years I had carried Logan, hoping he would find his own strength. Now I saw the truth. Strength wasn't given. It was earned. I started the engine, the hum filling the silence. My course was clear now. Victor thought he could intimidate me with lawyers and threats, but I had something stronger. Proof, and I was ready to use it. The rain had slowed by the time I pulled into the small parking lot outside Mary Chen's office. The asphalt still glistened with puddles, and the oak trees along the sidewalk shook water from their leaves with each gust of wind. I killed the engine and sat for a moment, the wipers frozen mid-swipe, the folder still on the seat beside me. I had gone to Jacob for protection, but now it was time to look at the numbers. Numbers didn't bend to emotion. Numbers told the truth. Mary had been my accountant for years, sharp and steady, never wasting words. Inside, her office was lit with the cold glow of fluorescent lights, the air faintly chemical from printer toner. Papers and spreadsheets were stacked in neat piles across her desk. She looked up from her computer when I walked in, her glasses slipping down her nose. "Tom," she said, pushing her chair back slightly, "it's been a while. What brings you in?" I set the folder down and took a seat across from her. "I need clarity. I've cut Logan off. Took back the car, stopped paying the mortgage. Victor is circling, and I need to know if there are any hidden ties between my accounts and theirs. Anything they could use to pull me under." She nodded once and flipped open the folder, her eyes narrowing as she scanned the statements. Her fingers moved quickly across her keyboard, pulling up digital records that glowed green and black on the screen. The soft clicking filled the room while I sat watching, my hands resting on my knees. After a few minutes, she pushed her glasses higher on her nose. "Your accounts are clean," she said. "No joint ownership with Logan anywhere. That's good. But I do see something interesting." She turned the monitor slightly so I could see. Rows of transactions filled the screen, line after line of Logan's so-called startup expenses. The amounts weren't large, but the pattern was clear. Money flowed from his accounts into something called Hale Advisory Group LLC, then out again as consulting payments. My stomach tightened. "That's Victor's company, isn't it?" Mary nodded. "Yes, he's been siphoning money through Logan's ventures. On paper it looks like legitimate consulting fees, but the numbers tell another story. He's taking money back out of your son's failed projects, dressing it up as professional advice." I leaned forward, my voice low. "So every time I wired Logan cash for another idea, Victor ended up with a cut." "Exactly," she said. "You were indirectly funding Victor's pocket. That's why Logan believed Victor was supporting him. Victor made sure the money circled through his hands before it disappeared." I pressed my palms together, staring at the neat columns on the screen. All those late nights working overtime, every check I handed over, every bill I covered, only to see it funneled straight to the man who mocked me behind closed doors. The betrayal stung deeper than I expected. Mary kept scrolling. "And one more thing. I've noticed questionable deductions in Victor's filings. Overstated business expenses, blurred personal costs. If anyone were to report these irregularities, the IRS wouldn't ignore them. He's been bold, maybe too bold." "Oh." Her tone was calm, practical, but her words carried weight. The room seemed to shrink as the implications sank in. "So you're saying, if Victor pushes me, I could push back harder?" She met my eyes. "Yes, but tread carefully. Use the truth, not emotion. The truth is more than enough." I sat back in the chair, the fluorescent lights buzzing overhead, the smell of toner sharp in the air. I thought about the years I had handed Logan money with nothing more than a sigh, believing I was buying him time to find himself. All the while, Victor had been taking his cut, whispering in his ear, building himself up as the savior while I was painted as the fool. Mary printed out a summary and slid it across the desk. "Freeze any credits tied to Logan. That cuts off easy access. And if you want to report Victor, there are anonymous channels. Just be sure you have everything documented." I picked up the papers, the pages cool against my fingertips. Each line was another nail in the coffin of Victor's image. I imagined his polished smile slipping the moment someone asked the right questions about his books. Before I left, Mary leaned back, her voice softer. "Why now, Tom? Why did you finally draw the line?" I paused, staring down at the summary in my hands. "Because respect's been overdue. I've carried him long enough. If I don't stop now, he'll never learn. And Victor will keep winning off the sweat of my work." She nodded, jotting a final note on her pad. "Then you've already made the hardest choice. The numbers just back you up." When I stepped outside, the rain had stopped, but the street was slick, reflecting the cloudy sky like a sheet of glass. I climbed back into the Civic, set the papers on the seat, and gripped the steering wheel. The numbers told me everything I needed to know. Logan wasn't just lost. He was being used. And Victor wasn't just circling. He had been feeding on my sacrifices all along. As I pulled onto the road, the tires hissed over the wet pavement. The world outside looked ordinary, people hurrying into shops, a mother lifting her child into a car seat. But for me, the path ahead was clearer than it had ever been. I had proof now, not just anger, and proof had power. That night I cleared off the desk in my living room and spread everything out under the lamp. The light pooled across the wood, catching on the edges of envelopes and forms, until the whole surface looked like a battlefield of paper. The house was quiet, only the occasional creak of the old floorboards and the steady tick of the clock above me. Outside, the rain had moved on, leaving the streets slick and shining under the streetlights. I stacked the documents in order, car registration on the left, mortgage statements in the center, bank records and receipts to the right. I pulled my laptop closer and logged into the online portal, the glow of the screen painting my face in pale light. The first task was the house. I filled out the title affirmation request, line by line, entering dates and signatures, checking each box twice before moving forward. When the confirmation email landed in my inbox a few minutes later, I felt the weight of it settle into me. One stone lifted, another waiting. Next came the automatic payments. I navigated to the bank's system, canceled every linked transfer to Logan's account, and watched the screen refresh as the red letters appeared. Scheduled payment canceled. The air in the room felt cooler, the silence sharper. I printed the confirmation, the paper sliding warm into my hand. I moved to the certified letters. The envelopes were already addressed, one to Logan at the house he no longer truly owned, the other to Victor's office downtown. I drafted the notices carefully, each word measured, professional and final. No emotion, no pleading, just the facts. The car and house were mine, the support had ended, and any future contact should be conducted through proper channels. I slipped the papers inside, sealed the envelopes, and pressed them flat under my palm. Tomorrow, I would have them stamped and tracked, each envelope a marker of the line I had drawn. The last task was digital. I pulled up the account settings and froze the credit card Logan had been using without a second thought for years. The system asked for a reason, and I typed simply, unauthorized use. Clicking submit felt like closing a door that had been left open too long. I sat back in the chair, the lamplight flickering slightly as the bulb hummed. The room smelled faintly of ink and paper, the scent of something orderly, something controlled. I opened a new browser window and began drafting an anonymous tip. Mary's words echoed in my head as I typed. Questionable deductions, overstated expenses, blurred lines between personal and business. I didn't need to embellish. The numbers spoke for themselves. I attached the scanned summaries, checked the details twice, then hit send. The progress bar crawled across the screen until it was done. The evidence was out of my hands now. The inbox began to ping almost immediately. Confirmation emails from the bank. Title transfer submission received. Payment cancellations processed. My phone vibrated on the desk, the notifications stacking one after another. Each one tightened the wall I was building, each ping a brick laid firm. Then came a new vibration. An email from Victor himself, the subject line screaming in all caps. Cease your interference. The words jumped out at me, arrogant and desperate all at once. Before I could open it, the phone rang. His name lit the screen, bold and sharp. I didn't answer right away. I let it buzz against the wood, a steady hum in the quiet room. My eyes moved over the piles of paper, the sealed envelopes, the glow of the confirmation emails still on the laptop screen. Everything I had done tonight was rooted in proof, not emotion. I wasn't the weak man he thought he could intimidate. The phone buzzed one last time and went silent, leaving the room heavy with the kind of quiet that follows a storm. I leaned forward, pressing my palms flat against the desk. My hands were rough, calloused from years of work, but steady. For the first time in a long while, I felt control returning to me. I gathered the papers into neat stacks, slid them back into the folder, and set it on the edge of the desk. Tomorrow the envelopes would go out, the notices would be in motion, and Victor would have no choice but to see me for what I was. Not bitter, not broken, not obsolete. The lamp flickered again as I shut down the laptop. I turned toward the window, the street outside dark except for the glint of water on the pavement. Somewhere in that darkness Victor was probably pacing, his polished shoes clicking against marble floors, his voice raised in anger. Let him rage. My wall was already built, and the first cracks in his empire were beginning to show. I turned off the lamp, the room falling into shadow, and carried the folder upstairs. Each step on the staircase sounded deliberate, like a drumbeat leading me forward. Tonight had been about paper, about order, about proof. Tomorrow would be about standing tall when the storm came. The call came again the next evening, just as the sun slipped behind the houses across the street. The living room was dim except for the orange glow from the lamp in the corner. I stood at the window, the phone buzzing in my hand. This time I answered. Victor's voice came through smooth at first, the way it always did, polished like he was still standing on some stage. "Tom," he said, dragging my name out slowly. "We need to talk like reasonable men. You've made some rash decisions. The car, the house, the payments. You're humiliating your son and embarrassing yourself." I kept my voice calm. "I took back what was mine. That isn't rash. That's fair." His laugh was quick and sharp, like glass breaking. "Fair? You think this is about fairness? You've turned a family matter into a spectacle. Do you realize how unstable Logan is right now? He's my responsibility now. You've proven you can't handle him." I clenched my jaw, the phone hot against my ear. "My son is not your project. He doesn't need your control dressed up as help. He needs reality." The mask slipped then. His tone changed, the smoothness gone. "Reality is that you've been obsolete for years. Logan sees it, Diane sees it, and soon everyone else will too. You're nothing but a bitter old man clinging to scraps while I build futures." I turned from the window and walked slowly across the room, each step heavy on the hardwood floor. "You build illusions, Victor. I've seen the filings. I know where the money goes. You've been feeding off my support while calling yourself the savior. That game is over." "Oh." Silence crackled for a moment on the line, and when he spoke again, his words came faster, less measured. "You don't know what you're talking about. And if you think you can dig into my business, you'll regret it. I'll bury you in lawsuits before you can blink. You don't have the money or the stamina to go against me." I let out a breath through my nose, steady and slow. "Then file whatever you want. My lawyer is ready. I've carried this family long enough while you strutted around in suits and fancy cars. I'm not scared of you." His voice rose, no polish left at all. "You'll lose, Tom. You'll lose everything. Logan will side with me. He already has. Do you want to be remembered as the father who destroyed his own son?" For the first time I smiled, not out of joy, but out of a kind of clarity. Destroying him would have been letting this go on, teaching him to live on lies. I'm giving him the only chance he has left, to stand on his own. There was a sound on the line, like he had slammed a hand on a desk. Then his words came out like a slip, a piece of truth he hadn't meant to reveal. "Logan was supposed to sign the loan this week. I told him to use your name as a guarantor. Without you, the deal collapses." I froze, my hand tightening on the phone. "You tried to put my name on one of your schemes." He caught himself, his tone snapping back to smooth. "That's not what I meant. Forget it." But it was too late. The truth hung there between us, heavy as stone. He had planned to use me just as he had used Logan. "I'm done here," I said, my voice low. "You've shown enough." I hung up before he could respond, the click cutting through the quiet like a gavel. I stood in the middle of the living room, the phone still in my hand, my heart pounding hard against my ribs. The lamp threw my shadow long across the wall, and I stared at it, wondering how many years I had lived in someone else's shadow without realizing it. Then came the knock at the door. Heavy, urgent, shaking the frame. I walked to the peephole and looked out. Logan stood on the porch, his face pale, his eyes wild, his fists balled at his sides. The porch light above him cast sharp lines across his features, and for a moment he looked less like the boy I had raised, and more like a stranger caught in a storm. I unlocked the chain and opened the door just a crack. He shoved hard, pushing it wide enough to step inside. "Let me in, Dad," he said, his voice ragged. "We need to talk now." The air between us was charged, the kind that makes your skin prickle before a lightning strike. I closed the door behind him and braced myself, knowing the storm was about to break. The door rattled as Logan pushed his way inside, his chest heaving like he had run the whole way. He stood there in the entryway, damp from the night air, his eyes flashing with anger and something close to fear. The family photo on the wall tilted slightly from the force of the door, the faces inside it frozen in a happier time that felt so far away now. "You've gone too far, Dad," he said, his voice cracking between rage and panic. "The car, the house, the payments. You're ruining my life. Do you even care what you're doing to me?" I stayed where I was, my back straight, my hands steady at my sides. I care enough to stop enabling you, I said quietly. I care enough to let you face what you've been avoiding. He ran a hand through his hair, pacing the floor in front of me, his bare feet slapping against the wood. You don't get it. Victor's been helping me. He understands. He told me you'd do this, that you'd try to control me. He said if you weren't so bitter, I'd already be ahead. My chest tightened, but my voice stayed calm. Helping you, Victor tried to get you to sign a loan in my name, didn't he? Logan froze, his face twisting. He opened his mouth, closed it again, then looked away. You don't know what you're talking about. I know enough, I said. He admitted it on the phone. He told you to use my name as a guarantor. He was ready to drag me into one of his schemes, and you almost went along with it. His shoulders dropped for a second, guilt flickering across his face, but then his anger flared again. You think you're better than him. You think you're some noble man for cutting me off. I needed that deal. I needed a chance. And you just tore it all away. I stepped closer, my voice low but firm. I gave you chance after chance, Logan. Every car payment, every tuition check, every mortgage statement with my name on it. I gave you more chances than most fathers ever could. And what did you do? You threw them away because they didn't look shiny enough next to Victor's promises. He turned on me then, his face red, his words jagged. You held me back. You're still in construction at your age, breaking your back for scraps. Victor knows how to win. He knows how to live big. You've always been average. I felt the sting of it, but I didn't flinch. Average keeps the lights on. Average pays the bills. Average raises kids and makes sure they eat. Average builds something real while men like Victor play empire builder with other people's money. You call me average, but average kept you alive. Logan's fists clenched at his sides. He looked around the room as if the walls themselves were closing in. The crooked family photo caught his eye, and he sneered. Look at this house. Look at you. You're stuck in the past. You'll never be more than this. Victor is the future, and you're just a roadblock. The anger in his voice hit me like a wave, but beneath it I heard something else. Fear, desperation, a man who had run out of excuses. I took a deep breath and spoke evenly. I'm not your roadblock. I'm your father, and for too long I've been your crutch. That ends now. You walk on your own or you fall on your own, but I'm not carrying you anymore. His chest rose and fell fast, his breathing ragged. He pointed a shaking finger at me. You'll regret this. You'll lose me forever. Victor says once I cut you off, I'll finally be free. Maybe he's right. Maybe I don't need you at all. I let his words hang in the air, heavy and sharp. Then I said softly, maybe you don't. But if you keep chasing Victor, you won't just lose me. You'll lose yourself. The silence that followed was thick, broken only by the ticking of the clock on the wall. Logan's face twisted with conflict, his pride battling with the truth he didn't want to face. He spun on his heel, stormed to the door, and yanked it open so hard the frame rattled. Fine, he shouted over his shoulder. Stand there and act like you're righteous. Victor will take care of me, you'll see. You'll be left with nothing. The door slammed shut behind him, shaking the photo on the wall until it hung even more crooked. I stood there staring at it, the laughter of that long-ago summer frozen behind the cracked glass, mocking me. Outside, I heard his footsteps pounding down the walkway, then the roar of an engine as he slid into a car that wasn't his. Tires screeched against the pavement, the sound fading into the night. The house settled back into silence, but it wasn't peaceful. It was the kind of silence that buzzes in your ears, heavy and charged, like the storm had passed but left the air hot and restless. I walked to the window and looked out at the empty street, the porch light casting its glow on nothing but shadows. I knew this wasn't the end. The real battle had only just begun. The next week stretched out like a rope pulled too tight, each day marked by the sound of paper sliding through my mailbox and the silence that followed after I tore the envelopes open. The first notice came on Monday, stamped with the seal of the county clerk, a formal confirmation that the foreclosure process had begun. The words were cold, typed in black ink, without a trace of emotion. It was just business to them, but to me it was years of sacrifice being cut loose. I set the paper down on the kitchen table, the laminate surface already cluttered with other documents, and stared at it until the letters blurred. Tuesday brought certified mail receipts from the notices I had sent. Logan had signed for his. Victor's office had accepted theirs. The proof was in my hands, green slips with scribbled signatures. Undeniable. I tucked them into the folder, the one that had become my shield. By Wednesday, the neighborhood gossip had caught up. As I drove past Logan's place, I saw movers carrying boxes down the front steps. The lawn that had once been trimmed was overgrown, weeds pushing through cracks in the driveway. The curtains were drawn tight, but the sound of raised voices leaked out, muffled but unmistakable. I didn't stop. I didn't even slow down. I just drove past, watching in the mirror as the truck swallowed his belongings, one box at a time. Thursday morning I was pouring coffee when the phone rang. It was the neighbor with the petunias, her voice low and careful, as if she wasn't sure she should be telling me. "Tom," she said, "I've lived here long enough to know what I've seen. You've carried that boy for years. Groceries, rent, cars, always you. Don't let anyone tell you different." Her words caught me off guard, a kindness I hadn't expected. When the call ended, I sat in the armchair by the window, the steam from my coffee curling in the air, and let the quiet truth of her words sink in. Friday was the hardest. A foreclosure notice, bold black letters that left no room for misunderstanding, was nailed to the door of Logan's house. I drove past in the late afternoon, the sky heavy with gray clouds, and saw it fluttering in the wind. Logan was standing in the yard, his shoulders slumped, his voice sharp as he barked orders at the movers. He looked smaller somehow, deflated, a man forced to face what he had avoided for too long. I parked a few houses down and watched for a minute. He didn't see me. I didn't want him to. When the truck doors slammed shut, the echo carried down the street like a final word. By Saturday, the silence settled. My phone buzzed less. The angry calls replaced by short texts, most of them unreadable fragments of frustration. I ignored them. The house felt quieter than it had in years, though not peaceful. It was the kind of quiet that follows a storm, heavy with what had been lost. I filled the hours with small tasks, repairing a loose board on the deck, cleaning the gutters, mowing the lawn. Work steadied me. Each chore was something I could control while the rest of my world shifted under my feet. On Sunday, the silence broke again. A client called to tell me he had heard rumors about Victor's company losing a logistics contract. Nothing confirmed, just whispers. But whispers like that had a way of sticking. I didn't celebrate. I just listened, made a note in my head, and went back to the yard work. That night, as I sat at the kitchen table with the lamp burning low, I flipped through the folder again. The notices, the receipts, the confirmations. Each paper was proof of the line I had drawn, a wall no one could tear down. The house creaked in the quiet, the sound of age settling into wood. I leaned back in the chair, the folder closed, and let the silence press in around me. It had been a long week, a week of papers, processes, and consequences. A week of watching my son face the reality I had shielded him from for too long. And though the silence was heavy, it carried something else too. A shift. A sense that the story was no longer just about me and Logan. Victor's mask was beginning to slip, and the cracks in his empire were starting to show. I set the folder aside, turned off the lamp, and stood in the dark. The week had ended, but the fight was far from over. Maya called me on a Tuesday evening, her voice quick and serious. "Dad, I think you need to come over. I found something you should see." The way she said it left no room for hesitation. I grabbed the folder from my desk, slid it under my arm, and drove across town. The streets were quiet, the last light of day fading behind the rooftops, the sky turning that pale blue before the night takes over. Her apartment was small, second floor of an old brick building. The the hallway smelling faintly of paint and fried food from someone cooking down the hall. She opened the door before I even knocked, pulling me inside with that worried look in her eyes. The coffee table was covered with takeout containers, a laptop glowing in the middle like a lantern. "Sit," she said, pushing a chair toward me. "You need to see this." On the screen were screenshots of messages, lines of text highlighted and dated. I leaned closer, my chest tightening as I read. It was Victor, no mistaking the number or the tone. One message read, "Cut your dad out completely, and I'll fund your next venture." Another said, "He's weak. You don't owe him anything. I'll take you further than he ever could." I felt my stomach twist, heat rising into my face. "He actually said this to Logan?" Maya nodded, scrolling down. "There's more. Look here." She clicked through bank statements she had pulled from her shared access with Logan, back when they had tried to help each other budget years ago. The records showed money flowing from Logan's accounts into Hale Advisory Group LLC, then out again as consulting payments. The trail was neat, too neat, like someone had designed it to look official while bleeding him dry. Every transfer carried a date I recognized. Moments when Logan had called me, desperate, telling me he just needed one more shot, one more idea, one more payment. I had wired him money, thinking I was giving him space to grow, and each time the money had circled back into Victor's pocket. I pressed my hands against my knees, leaning forward, trying to keep my voice steady. So all those times he told me Victor was helping him, it was really my money doing the helping. "Yes," Maya said softly. "Victor was dressing it up, making it look like support, when really he was feeding off everything you gave Logan. He made himself the hero with your sweat." The words cut deep, sharper than I expected. Years of overtime, nights spent too tired to eat, paychecks carved down to nothing, all of it siphoned through the man who stood in my place at family gatherings, smiling in his tailored suits. I stared at the screen, the numbers blurring into each other. Maya touched my arm, her voice gentle. "Dad, you need to know this. I don't think Logan even saw the truth. Victor made sure he only saw the praise and the promises, not the way the money moved. He played both of you." I swallowed hard, my throat dry. I thought I was giving Logan chances. All I did was give Victor leverage. She looked at me with that patient steadiness she always had, the same look her mother used to give me when the bills piled too high. But this time there was no softness in her tone. "You were doing what any father would do, but now you can't ignore it. You have proof. Use it." The rain started outside, pattering against the window, streaking the glass. I sat back in the chair, the glow of the laptop washing over both of us, the room filled with the quiet buzz of the computer fan and the steady rhythm of the storm. I opened my folder, laying out the papers I had brought, receipts and statements I had collected for years. Together we compared them against the records on her screen. The pattern was undeniable. Every path led back to Victor. Every chance I gave Logan became another step in Victor's climb. Maya shook her head, disgust plain on her face. "He's not just manipulative, Dad. He's deliberate. He wanted Logan to hate you, so that every time you pulled away he could swoop in and look like the savior. But he was using both of you the whole time." The anger inside me hardened into something sharper, cleaner. Proof was no longer just in my folder. It was glowing on the screen, written in Victor's own words, stamped with dates and amounts. There was no denying it. I looked at Maya, her eyes filled with both sadness and resolve. "Thank you," I said quietly. "You just gave me what I needed." She hesitated before speaking again. "Dad, there's one more thing. I think you should see Mom. She needs to know what Victor has been doing, and I don't think she'll believe it unless you put it right in front of her." I sat there for a moment, the idea pressing on me like weight. Diane, who had chosen Victor's promises over my steady grind. Diane, who still defended him whenever she called. The thought of standing in front of her with the proof in my hands felt heavier than any job site I had ever worked. But Maya was right. If I wanted the truth to cut through the lies, I had to face her too. I closed the folder, slid it under my arm, and nodded. "All right," I said. "It's time she saw what he really is." The rain drummed harder against the glass as I stood to leave, the sound filling the room like a warning. I walked out with the folder pressed against my side, the glow of Maya's laptop still burning behind me, a light shining on the cracks Victor could no longer hide. Diane's house sat at the end of a quiet cul-de-sac, a modern two-story with a wide driveway and stone pillars framing the entry, the kind of place Victor liked to show off, all sharp lines and polished marble. I parked the Civic at the curb and sat for a moment with the folder in my lap, the rain from earlier leaving streaks across the windshield. The house glowed from the inside, light spilling through tall windows, warm in appearance but cold in memory. I walked up the stone steps, each one echoing under my boots, and rang the bell. Diane opened the door herself, her hair tied neatly back, her eyes already heavy with suspicion. "Tom," she said, her voice cautious. "What are you doing here?" I held the folder tight under my arm. "We need to talk. It's about Logan, and about Victor." She hesitated, glancing over her shoulder into the house, then stepped aside. "All right, come in." The foyer was spotless, the air scented with something expensive and floral. Marble floors stretched out in front of me, cold under the soft lights. Diane led me into the sitting room, where everything was glass and steel. No warmth, no clutter, just the kind of place staged for appearances. I set the folder on the glass coffee table and sat down across from her. She crossed her arms. "Logan is distraught, Tom. He says you've destroyed him, taking the car, cutting off the mortgage. I know he's not perfect, but this is too much. You're his father." I opened the folder and slid a page across the table. "I am his father." That's why I stopped. "Look at this." She frowned, picking it up. It was a bank statement, the kind Maya had shown me. Money flowing from Logan's account into Hale Advisory Group, then out again labeled as consulting. "What am I supposed to see?" she asked, her voice sharpening. "Look at the dates," I said, leaning forward. "Every one of those transfers matches a time Logan came to me for money. I gave him cash, thinking I was giving him a chance, but the money never stayed with him. It went straight to Victor, disguised as support." Her eyes flicked over the lines again, her lips pressed tight. "This doesn't prove anything. Victor has businesses. He advises people. That's his work." I pulled out another sheet, a printed screenshot of Victor's messages to Logan. I laid it down in front of her, the words highlighted. "Cut your dad out completely and I'll fund your next venture. He's weak. You don't owe him anything." The color drained from her face. She picked it up with trembling hands, her eyes darting back and forth as she read. "Where did you get this?" "Maya," I said. "She saw everything. Victor isn't helping Logan. He's been bleeding him dry and turning him against me. He's been playing all of us, Diane, including you." She sank back into her chair, the papers still in her hand. For a moment, silence stretched through the room, the only sound the soft tick of the clock on the mantel. Then her voice cracked. "I didn't know." "Yes." I let the words hang there. "Of course you didn't. Because Victor never wanted you to. He wanted you to believe he was saving Logan, that I was the bitter obstacle. He wanted you to keep defending him while he used us all." Her eyes filled with tears, though she tried to hold them back. She looked down at the page again, then set it aside with shaking fingers. "Tom, I swear, I never saw this side of him. He told me you were jealous, that you couldn't stand to see him succeed." "Oh?" I shook my head. "I never cared about his cars or his suits. I cared about our kids. I cared about Logan. And while I was working overtime, paying bills, keeping a roof over his head, Victor was slipping him poison in the form of promises. You stood by and let him." Her voice rose, a mix of anger and shame. "Don't put this all on me. I wanted Logan to have stability. Victor said he could give him that. I thought I was doing what was best." I leaned forward, my eyes locked on hers. Best for whose stability doesn't come from manipulation. It doesn't come from empty promises and flashy gifts. It comes from work, from sacrifice, from facing the truth. And you let Victor convince you otherwise. She opened her mouth to argue, but her phone buzzed on the table. A message lit the screen. Victor's name glowing bright. Without thinking, she picked it up. Her eyes moved across the words, and I watched her face change. Her lips parted, her breath caught. She turned the phone toward me. The message read, "Keep Tom busy. I'll handle Logan. Don't let him get in the way." Her hand shook as she set the phone back down. When she looked up at me, her face was pale. Maybe you're right." I didn't answer. I didn't have to. The truth was sitting between us on the table, written in numbers and in Victor's own words. The cost of believing him was finally sinking in. Outside, a car door slammed. The sound echoed through the marble foyer, sharp and final. Diane's head snapped toward the window, her eyes wide. He's home. I closed the folder and stood, my body steady, my jaw set. The game of shadows was over. Victor was about to walk through the door, and this time there would be no polished mask left for him to hide behind. The front door opened with the smooth swing of a man who believed he owned every space he walked into. Victor stepped inside, his shoes clicking on the marble, his tailored suit untouched by the rain outside. He set his keys on the console table and looked up, his eyes landing on me like he had expected to find me there. His smile was tight, controlled, but his jaw twitched. "Well," he said, shrugging off his coat, "isn't this something, Tom Walker in my house?" I didn't move from where I stood in the sitting room. Diane was still holding her phone, her face pale, her breath shallow. Victor glanced at her, then back at me. "What's this little meeting about? Have you finally come to your senses and realized how foolish you've been?" I reached into the folder and pulled out 3 receipts, laying them flat on the glass coffee table. My voice was steady. "These are transfers from Logan's accounts to Hale Advisory Group, each one tied to money I gave him, each one ending up in your pocket." He didn't even look down at them. He straightened his cuffs instead. "Consulting fees. That's business, Tom. Something you wouldn't understand. While you're covered in dust, I'm building legacies." I ignored the jab. "And this," I said, sliding the screenshot of his message across the table, "is you telling my son to cut me out completely, promising him success if he turned his back on me, using my money to buy his loyalty." This time his eyes flickered, a crack in the polish. He picked up the paper, read the highlighted line, then tossed it back like it was meaningless. "That could be anyone. Screenshots are easy to fake." Diane's voice cut through the room, shaking but sharp. "It came from my phone, Victor. You sent it." For a moment, his mask slipped further. His eyes narrowed at her, his voice colder. "You don't know what you're talking about." I leaned forward, my hands on the table. "You've been bleeding him dry, Victor. You've been bleeding all of us dry. While I carried the weight, you played savior with stolen coin. That ends now." Now, before he could answer, Diane's phone buzzed again on the table. She picked it up, glanced at the screen, and her eyes widened. "It's a news alert," she whispered. She turned the phone so we could both see. The headline glared bright. "Hale Advisory faces compliance review after client suspensions." The room went still. Victor's jaw clenched, the veins in his neck tightening. I heard the faint sound of his teeth grinding as he forced a smile. "It's nothing. Competitors spreading rumors. It will pass." But the words rang hollow, even to him. His phone buzzed in his pocket, then again and again. He pulled it out, scanned the screen, and his mask cracked wider. Missed calls. Messages. A client backing out. Another delaying a contract. His empire was shaking under his feet. Diane's voice was low, almost a whisper. "You told me everything was stable." He snapped at her, his voice sharp. "I told you not to get in the middle of this." "Oh." She flinched, and for the first time I saw something shift in her. Doubt, fear. The strings Victor had pulled so carefully were beginning to fray. I stood straight, my voice calm, even. "The truth always comes out, Victor. You can hide behind cars and marble floors, but the numbers don't lie. The clients are walking, the review has begun, your legacy is cracking." He turned on me then, all polish gone, his voice raw. "You think you've won something here. You think a man like me can't survive a few setbacks. I'll rebuild faster than you can breathe. And when I do, you'll be nothing. Logan will see you for the small man you are. I didn't rise to his rage. I simply met his eyes and said, Logan already sees more than you want him to, and soon he'll see the rest. The silence that followed was thick, broken only by the buzz of his phone as more messages poured in. He stood there, his grip tight around the device, his mask slipping with every vibration. Diane set her phone down on the table, her voice steady now. Enough, Victor. I defended you for years. I told myself you were building something better, but I see it now. You're not building anything. You're taking, and I won't stand in the middle of it anymore. His eyes flashed with anger, but he didn't answer. He turned toward the foyer, his shoulders stiff, and for the first time he looked smaller in his own house. I gathered the papers back into the folder, my movements deliberate, calm. The fight wasn't over, not yet. But the cracks in his empire were showing, and no polished mask could hide them anymore. As I walked out into the night, the cool air hit my face, fresh and sharp. Behind me the house stood glowing under its lights, but I knew the foundation was no longer steady. Victor could rage, he could threaten, but the truth had already begun to pull him down. The night after I left Diane's house was quiet, but it wasn't the peaceful kind. The silence followed me home, heavy, filling every corner of the house until it felt like the walls themselves were waiting. I didn't sleep much. I sat at the kitchen table with the lamp on low, papers spread in front of me, the same folder that had become both weapon and shield. The clock ticked into the early hours, and I finally drifted into a shallow sleep with my head resting on my arms. The knock came the next evening, softer than I expected. I opened the door to find Logan standing there, his shoulders sagging, his jacket wrinkled, his eyes red-rimmed. He wasn't the angry young man who had stormed out of my house days earlier. He looked smaller, deflated, as though the weight of everything had finally landed on him. "Dad," he said, his voice low, almost breaking. "Can I come in?" I stepped aside, and he walked slowly into the kitchen. The same crooked family photo hung on the wall, tilted further from the last slam of the door. His eyes lingered on it before he sat down at the table. I poured us both coffee, though his hands shook as he wrapped them around the cup. He didn't start with excuses. He didn't start with blame. He stared into the steam rising from the cup and whispered, "I messed up." I stayed quiet, letting him speak. "I stayed at Victor's place after you cut me off. At first it felt like I'd finally made it. Big house, polished floors, everything shiny. But it was cold, Dad, empty. Every word he said had strings tied to it. He made me feel like I owed him everything, like I was a project he owned. And when I saw the eviction notice, when I packed my things into boxes, it hit me. All this time I was living on what you gave me, and I spit in your face for it." "Oh." His voice cracked then, his eyes wet. "I called you a loser while sitting in the house you paid for, driving the car you kept running. I didn't see it. I didn't want to see it. I'm sorry." I leaned back, my arms crossed, the apology hanging in the air. A memory rose unbidden, of him as a boy, grinning wide when I finished building his treehouse. His small hands clutching mine, his trust absolute. That boy was buried under years of entitlement and influence, but for the first time in a long time I caught a glimpse of him again. "Words are a start," I said finally, "but actions matter more. You've leaned on crutches for too long. If you're ready to stand, prove it." He nodded quickly, reaching into his jacket. He pulled out a small envelope, creased at the edges. "I know. No more handouts. I've got a job interview tomorrow. Warehouse work. Hard labor, the kind you did. I want to earn something for myself." I took the envelope, opened it, and saw a handwritten schedule tucked inside. A simple piece of paper, but it was more than I had seen from him in years. His voice cracked again. "Victor's pulling away. I see now he only used me to get at you. I don't want to be his pawn anymore." Before I could respond, the front door opened softly. Maya stepped inside, her key turning in the lock. She looked around, sensing the weight in the air, and asked gently, Everything okay? Logan turned to her, his voice raw. Sis, I'm owning up. Dad's right, I need to build my own way. No more blaming. No more waiting for someone else to carry me. The three of us sat at the table for a simple meal I had prepared earlier, grilled cheese and tomato soup. I placed each plate down carefully. Not fancy, just deliberate. Maya offered her brother a small smile. It's a step, Logan. Dad has always been fair. I extended my hand across the table. Logan gripped it, his eyes steady, sealing the moment with more weight than any speech could hold. Your family, I told him, but the support ends here. From now on, you earn it. He nodded, the words sinking in. We ate in silence, the kind that wasn't heavy this time, but steady, like the first calm after a storm. When Logan left later that night, he hugged Maya, then turned to me. His voice was quiet, but it carried a different kind of strength. I'll show you, Dad, you'll see. I watched him walk down the path, his steps slower, more measured. The porch light cast his shadow long across the lawn until it faded into the night. Maya hugged me tight before leaving, too. I'm proud of you, Dad, she whispered. Later, I filed the last of the papers away, the rustle of the pages like closing a chapter. Then I stepped out onto the deck with a glass in my hand. Above me the stars shimmered against the dark sky, steady and bright. I lifted the glass in a quiet toast to new beginnings, but I didn't fool myself. The phone buzzed inside the house. I walked back in, picked it up, and saw an unknown number flashing on the screen. I answered, and a muffled voice came through. Tom, it's about Hale. Call me back. I stood there with the phone pressed to my ear, the crooked photo still on the wall, the river of silence flowing through the house. The battle with Logan had shifted, but the war with Victor was not finished. Not yet. In the end, I learned that sometimes love means stepping back and letting your children face the weight of their own choices. Logan finally saw the truth, not through more of my sacrifices, but through the silence that came when I stopped carrying him. As for Victor, the cracks in his empire were only just beginning to show. Respect isn't bought with cars or promises. It is earned through honesty and hard work. What about you? Would you have done the same in my shoes? Share your thoughts in the comments, like this video, and subscribe for more stories like mine.